Welcome everyone to our webinar on Google Analytics and feature flags. We're certainly happy that you took some time out of your day to join us today. This will approximately be around 20 to 30 minutes, not too long, not too short, and hopefully you'll walk away with some new tidbits. So we're going to start today with some introductions to myself, to my colleagues, and then also to Split and GA. And then we're going to get into the integration, go through some use cases, and then just kind of show the flow back and forth. And then we're going to actually show you what it looks like. So we'll do a demo and then have some time for some questions. And feel free to put some questions in the Q&A box. And if not, you can always email hello@split.io and we will answer those questions. So let's do some introductions to my lovely colleagues. I have Miko, one of our software engineers, and Channing, our experimentation advisor. My name is Leah, and we will be here, be your hosts. I think most everyone knows what Split is, but if you do need a reminder, we are the leading feature delivery platform, which helps you manage feature flags and target to specific users. You can do monitoring with your features as you push those to production, and then also with experimentation, so you can determine statistically significant impact on your KPIs and your testing. If you want to know more about Split, you can certainly go to our website. And I think it would be safe to assume that everyone knows what Google Analytics is as well, used by 86% of the top websites, really the industry standard for web performance. Because it is so ubiquitous to everything that we're measuring and doing today, that was one of the impetus for creating this integration. If you yourself are not using Google Analytics, I guarantee you someone on your team or an adjacent team are actually using them on a daily basis. So really that was the driving force. And I'm going to pass it off to Nico to explain a little bit more as to why we did this integration and what we were hoping to accomplish with it.
Thank you very much, Leah. So given the popularity of GA, we encountered that we had a lot of users, a lot of customers that were already tracking some of their business metrics or performance metrics using it. And they had this question of, okay, but now I want to experiment with Split because let's assume our platform is very good. But they had the challenge of they needed to instrument some of our SDK event tracking calls, the client.track method to be specific. They would need to add that all over the place whenever they are capturing something through GA that they want to experiment in Split with it too. So that could be solved by yourself by just creating a wrapper in which you track your events, and in there you use the GA.send method to capture those. To give you an example, so there you could easily add the code to our SDK too. But on a real world scenario, you might have your PM setting tracking through Google Tag Manager or something like that. So it starts getting tricky. Your calls to GA might be all over the place, so you would not have all the control from your wrapper. So the pain of sending those events into Split, that was the main driver for us to start thinking through this integration. So we wanted to make it easy and out of the box for you to use. So linking Split and Google Analytics is not that hard. The basic of what you need, you can see it here on this style. It's going to be an SDK to SDK integration. So we will only capture information that's being picked up on that web app through the Analytics.js library. And the snippet you can see there, it's what you're going to find in most places. It's like the de facto way to integrate GA into your app. And really quickly, over the top, going through the three sections that it has. The first is it creates a Google Analytics command queue and loads the script for you. Then it creates your tracker where you are setting your web property ID. And for those familiar with Split, that's the equivalent to our API key. And then it's just sending a page view event from that same page to say, okay, hey, this page, the root in this case, has loaded. And towards the bottom, you can see a basic Split JavaScript SDK configuration object. We are only setting our API key there. the ID of the user, and we are telling the SDK we want to use the Google Analytics into Split type of integration. And it's as easy as that. That's the main requirement for it. So it shouldn't be hard to just integrate both SDKs and make them connect with each other. So before we dive into what Split built, let's cover this basic concept of GA that are going to make it easier for us to go through the rest. So Google Analytics, you all know it. You have that web console. It's the library itself. It's that analytics.js that will be downloaded into your web. We don't need to talk too much about that. And there are three concepts that are important here and come into play. In GA, you have your trackers. For those familiar with Split, an equivalent would be very similar to our factories, or basically the instances you use of our SDK. And that tracker is what you can basically create multiple only if you need. On most cases, you will only be tracking on using one web property ID, so you are not going to have that fourth parameter there. But that create call, it's the one we saw before. It's the way you have to create those instances of GA you want to use. Then it comes the concept of plugins. As you probably know, GA supports a bunch of plugins for different things, to track e-commerce interactions, to track performance with AutoTrack. You can even write your own. You might be wanting to log or to keep some tracking on the links that are visited. Plugins are very, very flexible to use in GA, and they have that mechanism that allows you to just load them into that into your trackers and consume it without any sort of monkey patching, sniffing the network, nothing all like that's going on here. And the last piece here, it would be the hits. The hit is the unit of an event. So whenever you send a page view, you're actually sending a hit. If you have, let's say, a plugin like the AutoTrack, that's also sending hits with performance data to GA. If you are sending a custom event, you are also sending a hit. And you have many ways you can write those, because you may be adding fields or not, you may be adding dimensions or not. Let's not worry about that. But whenever you see the send command of GA, that's actually sending a hit. And for equivalencies here between Split and Google Analytics, we can think of those as the equivalent to the Split events. You're tracking through the client.track. So now that we covered that, let's go to our use cases. So these are the two options that we support out of the box. The names are not that creative, of course, but we support one that's from Google Analytics sending information to Split. That's the meat and potatoes here. That's the one we built to reduce the pain of adopting experimentation. So if you're already tracking with GA, you don't need to add any crazy things to just capture that. And on the other one, it's to send our pieces of data, the events and the impressions that our SDK is generating, into GA as hits for you to play around with those however you like. This format you see here, for integrations, we are going to keep it on our JavaScript SDK. So whenever we add more, this is kind of how those will look. So this will be standard. So now let's talk a little bit about the Google Analytics into Split side of the integration. So you have some sort of equivalency up there. What I mentioned before, from a send event, a send command that generates a hit. So what we are going to do is kind of translate it to something similar to that client.track you see there. And we are going to send it as an event to our own platform. So to configure it should be easy enough. Well, what you need to do is, since we built a plugin, you need to require that plugin on the tracker you want to use it for. So to give you like a real-world example of why you might have two trackers and why it's not that common, that's only if you want to track into different dashboards. Let's say that your marketing team is tracking some metrics on some end, but you have your engineering teammates tracking on a different dashboard because they care about a different type of thing. If you have that case, this is as extensible as you would like. You can require a plugin on the trackers you want to use it, and that's it. For providing it, we are going to do it automatically for you as long as you are setting our Google Analytics to Split integration. It is kind of important to know something there, that whenever you add the require command using GA, that holds the execution of those commands. So what it does, that's the mechanism that GA has to wait for asynchronous plugin provision. And if you require our plugin too late on the flow of your page, you might miss some events because we are not going to see anything that happened before you require our plugin. But as long as you do it, that would be the ideal right after you create the tracker, but you could also require it at a later time if you want. Just keep in mind that we are going to miss the hits that you kill before you require it. After covering that, the only piece is the split side of the configuration. Actually, if we can keep it a little bit more on the previous one, sorry. As you can see there, you are providing the type. That's the only requirement here, to provide that object with the type with analytics into split. But it supports some more configurations. The prefix, if you want to add one for easily filtering this in split or separate those events from the events that you are sending somewhere else. The prefix by default is GA. And then we support some other configurations. You can set some identities if you want to track for multiple traffic types at the same time for the same event. You can define those, and we are going to multiplex the hits. And the most important thing is that you have a Boolean that's going to respect the type of the information here, which is hit. You can see all of this on our documentation, of course, but with that, you could say, I want to turn it on or off programmatically if you want, without having to remove the code. And we also support a filtering function, so you can decide, okay, this hit I want to track or not, apply whatever filtering you want, the criteria that best suits your case. And similar to that, it also supports a mapping function, so you can give it the shape that you consider to be the most accurate. We have a default one. You can see the details in our docs. And now, in a similar fashion, as I said, we built the other side of the integration, which is for sending split information into Google Analytics. And again, you have some equivalencies there at the top, where from the client.tracks that generates events on our side, it's kind of how that would look if you were trying to send it into GA. And similarly, whenever you call the get treatment, we generate an impression. So kind of how that would look if you were trying to send that into GA. This one is a little bit easier to configure because the only thing you need to set is the split SDK. But again, we have that type context there, constant there, that you have to set up to turn it on. And we kind of have the same concepts on this one that on the previous one. Instead of the identities, what you might need to add is multiple trackers. By default, we are just going to use the main one. Don't bother about that if you don't have multiple. If you have a config to set those two, so we are aware. And after that is we have those booleans that allow you to turn tracking of a certain type of data on and off. But in this case, we don't have hits, we have events, and we have impressions. So you could really easily, by just defining a boolean property, say, okay, I only want to track impressions, for example. And if you need to filter by more granular criteria, you can define the filter callback there. And again, everything is on our documentation, the data models for that, but you're going to get the information in it, the raw impression or the raw event, and what's the type of that. So you can decide, applying the criteria that best suits your case. And if you want to change the way we are mapping our impressions as our event, or our events as Google Analytics hits, you can, again, define a mapper here that's going to get by provided to you the raw data, the raw piece of data, and what's the default mapping we have. So you can modify it and tweak it and send it into GA with whichever information you want to add to it, or just changing the format if our default one doesn't really work for you. That's kind of it. So I guess now it's demo time.
Thank you, Nico. That was wonderful. You are now going to go over to Channing to look at it in action.
So this is a sample application. It's a very simple to-do list kind of a thing. We can add an issue. we can close an issue, and we can delete an issue. And all three of those actions are currently instrumented using Google Analytics with Ascend. And if we go to my Google Analytics console, we can see, yeah, we see those three event actions: issue added, issue closed, issue deleted. So as you know, my application exists, it has Google Analytics. Now I'm adding Split. I want to run an experiment. And our product managers, for some reason, think that changing the text on this button here from create to add will somehow influence people to create more issues. And we're going to use that as a metric. As noted, we're getting those events in Google Analytics. Let's see how they show up in Split. Let's make sure that they're coming into Split. And we're looking at the event types in Split. As Nico noted, there's a default prefix of GA that gets added to the beginning of the event. And here we can see issue added, issue closed, issue deleted. We can go in and look at the details about those events and see, for instance, that they get passed with an event label that corresponds to the severity of the issue. And we might be able to use that in a metric if we want to know something particular to what severity an issue had when it was acted upon. And so we know the events are coming in. We have a split created here with two different versions of the treatment. One where the button text will say add, one where the button set text will say create. And then we have a targeting rule that's going to give half of our users the add button and half of our users the create button. And so we need to create a metric to measure that. If we go here, here's a metric defined called issues added per GA anonymous, and we're using that event, the issue added event, that's coming from Google Analytics. And this metric is going to be the number of events, of issue added events per anonymous user that comes in. And then with Split, we're going to be able to compare how the users who saw add behaved versus how the users who saw create behaved. And we see that on this metrics impact tab. We go there. At the top, we're looking at, we're using as a baseline the users who saw the create treatment. And we can see that approximately 1,200 users have seen that. And then again, on the other side, so we're going to compare add to that and see if it did better. And again, approximately 1,200 users have so far seen that version of the treatment. And then our metric cards show us the statistical evaluation of those metrics per arm of the experiment. So when we look at this metric we created to see how many issues a particular anonymous user created, we can see that even though our mean is 2% higher for add than create, it's not shown to a statistically significant degree that is a causal impact. We just know that there's roughly a 2% difference. We can, if we're interested in seeing the details of the comparison of those two treatments, we can dive into the metric details card. We can see that the behavior has been pretty consistent across the life of the experiment. And we can see some more information down at the bottom in detail. So the mean of number of issues created per user who saw the create button was 5.37. It was slightly higher for the add button. That explains that 2% uplift we saw. But the standard deviation is high enough that we can't say to a degree of statistical significance that add really is causing people to create more issues. One last look, Nico mentioned that the integration works in two directions. I'm demonstrating the Google Analytics to Split. In the Split to Google Analytics, you can see I also have that configured for this particular split. And the name of our split was front end issue tracker add button. And here in Google Analytics, we can see that event coming through. And if we go to event label, we can see that there's a label for the create treatment and a label for the add. And then this is how many we've gotten over the last couple days. If we showed that event over the life of the experiment, it would equal those approximately 1,200 ones that we saw in the split metrics. That concludes the demo.
Great. Thank you, Channing. We're going to open it up to questions now. If we don't get to yours, then you can always go to hello@split.io. But we do have one, which is, can I set a custom dimension on my Google Analytic events based on Split flags? And if that's true, then how do you do that? So Nico, do you want to take that one?
Definitely, I can take that one. So first, yes, you can, but we are not doing that automatically for you. And the reason why we do not do it automatically is because first, dimensions have a finite number. I don't recall off the top of my head if the limit was 20 or 12, but it's a small number. So you might be using those dimensions for something else, and you also need to configure those on the web console of Google Analytics, if I'm not mistaken. So it starts getting a little bit tricky. It adds more dependencies on the configuration side of the house if we were to automatically add one of those for you. In any case, it should be kind of straightforward for you to do it, because using GA, it should be easy enough for you to set the dimension by just using, I think it's the set command. And then depending on what you want to use that dimension for, if it's based on treatment evaluation information, you can definitely use our impression listener option. You will get the raw impression, you will get why it matched that rule, you will have a lot of information for you to set the dimension as you like. And if you are sending an event, you control that data, so you have it too. It should be easy enough for you to set it on GA, but we are just not going to do it automatically because of those reasons mentioned before. One more thing before I finish, we are going to eventually add an article showing that to our help center. So check there if you need some assistance on how to do it.
Great.
Yeah, just as an addition, another possibility there is you can create a segment in Google Analytics and have that segment defined by a particular event label for a user. And you could use the Split to Google Analytics integration to send an event and then look at the label. And if it has the create treatment, in my example, then that would be one segment. And if it had the add label, then that would be another segment. And then you could compare the behavior between those different segments.
Great. Thank you. All right. I think one more and then we will conclude. But this one is, will this work if I'm using Google Tag Manager, which I know a lot of people do. We do. So will this work?
Yes, it will. So that was kind of where it starts getting tricky if you yourself are trying to send the information into Split. So it doesn't matter where the code that's calling the GA send command lives, we will get it as long as you require our plugin and are running our SDK. So yes, we'll pick those up. And as for configuring, again, depending on how you're using GTM, you can do it. For us, it's just JavaScript, so don't expect any issues there.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for watching this, and thank you to Channing and Nico for joining me and showing this new integration. We're certainly excited about it, and you can go on our website to read more information. If you have any questions, certainly send us an email at hello@split.io. You can also follow us on Twitter for the latest news from Split. So thank you everyone, and have a great day.